I am Regina Larco, and this is Hashtag Impact, a podcast about stuff that matters. We recently aired the story behind Hashtag Impact, the full story. That is my personal account of how I got this podcast started. Thank you all so much for the lovely comments and reactions to this episode that I was so reluctant and quite nervous, to be frank, to publish. But I guess I should really take my own advice to heart that I am sharing all the way back in this episode, where I encourage everyone to show up for their own stories. Many of you have reached out, curious to hear more about the stories of our Hashtag Impact team members too. I have started this podcast on my own, but today I am not alone in this anymore. Hashtag Impact is joined by brilliant, talented co-hosts all over the globe that share my vision to empower organizations and individuals to take action, live consciously, give back, and identify how their contributions can make the world a better place. Today, you hear from our co-host, Carol Lee. After graduating from university, Carol went on to teaching English abroad in China and South Korea to learn more about where her family came from. This quest was not easy, at times unsettling, but mostly healing. This podcast was recorded live at the first Asian Podcast Festival during Asian Heritage Month in May 2021. Listen all the way to the end to hear how the audience reacted to Carol's moving story, searching for a place of belonging. You will also hear the wonderful and powerful voice of Uehara. She is the founder of the Asian American Podcasters Association based in the US and also the organizer behind the Asian Podcast Festival. I want to say a huge thanks to Uehara and Andrew Wang, who is the co-founder of the Asian American Podcasters Association, for bringing us all together, not just on that day, but all through the year. So, let's get started.
So now, so excited to share our next show, which is Hashtag Impact with Regina Larco and her guest Carol Lee. And Regina, welcome. Carol Lee, welcome back. You guys ladies were here earlier. I know it's a long day. And Regina, you look fresh as a daisy. You just got up, right? You're in Hong Kong, right?
I just got up. I can't believe it. I made it happen. I'm so happy to be here. Good morning from Hong Kong. And I have to check if my mic is set up correctly, but I have my coffee here. And I'm so happy to see you all and to have been listening to some of you earlier. Mila, I was there late night when you were on, but then I had to go to bed at some point. Angela, I heard as well. I'm sure you did all amazing. Thank you for having us. And good morning. Hello. Good afternoon to Carol in Honolulu.
Yes, welcome. And Carol's been here most of the time as well. Love the background. And we are now going to hand it over to you. You're going to record your episode as though, we're watching you record.
So exciting.
Okay. So I'm going to take it away.
Welcome, everyone. We're recording for Hashtag Impact Podcast at Asian Podcast Festival. And I am so thrilled to introduce you to a very special guest. Actually, I was thinking about how am I going to introduce Carol? Because her story is so fascinating and so complicated at the same time. So I actually thought, well, maybe let Carol share about her story and we will get to know her a bit better. We're celebrating Asian Heritage Month. And here at Hashtag Impact Podcast, we feature a lot of Asian voices. And we are really proud that we also have an Asian American co-host who is bringing us beautiful episodes from all over the globe, actually. And Carol brought us the most downloaded podcast episode of all times at Hashtag Impact, where she featured Teach North Korean Refugees, an amazing nonprofit working in South Korea to support North Korean refugees. So now I'm already talking way too long. Carol, I want to hear your beautiful voice. And actually, Carol, before we get into the story, maybe we should also explain to listeners how we first met. We have a story too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. Also so good to be here at this festival. It's been such a joy hearing all your incredible work and creating this space, especially for our Asian community. And it's interesting how my life turned out. But long story short, I was in Hong Kong working as an English tutor at Lingnan University. And my boss forwarded us an email saying, oh, Regina Larco is going to be speaking at a TED Talk that our school was organizing. And then I looked up Hashtag Impact, and knowing myself, I really wanted to pursue a career where I can make a difference in people's lives. I just sent her an email. I didn't even meet her before. I just sent an email saying, hi, I'm just fresh out of college, looking for some experiences. And I really like the work that you do. And I thought, oh, maybe I could help out and maybe learn a few things. And it's just been an incredible journey that we've kept in touch for, I think this is our third year now. And I've been able to work a lot on the podcast and write blogs and do social media. And then it's also helped me land a job, part-time job here in Hawaii with the Asian Studies Department at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. So this is our relationship. And then this is kind of interesting for me to be a guest on the podcast for once.
Yeah, it feels a bit nerve-wracking, right? If you're the one on the spot. Now we can, I think always when we put ourselves in that place to answer the questions, then we can relate even more to the guests and how nerve-wracking it is to put yourself out there like that with your own story. So I love that we get to do this now, Carol, because I know I pushed you into recording your first episode as well when you were traveling in Cambodia. I was like, just record with someone inspiring you find there. And you're like, are you sure? Should I do that? And I think you were shocked when I then actually put that episode on the channel. But that's yet another story. Actually, I want to go back, 4 years ago, something really, I think, pivotal happened in your life. You made a decision to go to China. And that was inspired by you really wanting to look into your roots and connect with your roots even more. And why this I find so interesting that you actually made that decision is, you just said you were already also interested in doing communications, journalism. So these were things that were already on your mind as well when you were a young student. And you had a prestigious internship lined up at CBS. You could have gone to LA, work there. I guess many of your peers were kind of looking at you like, are you sure you want to go to China now, Carol? What are you doing? So what made you go through with it to go to China 4 years ago?
That is a good question, but I immediately think I don't regret it whatsoever. And I think what really pushed me to make that decision was the year before my senior year in college, my junior year, all three of my grandparents passed away. One after another. And that was really hard because I was extremely close with them. And I'm not sure if anyone in this audience kind of feels close with family or friends or grandparents in the Asian community, but they just carry a very special something in our lives. And when they passed away, I felt I kind of lost a connection to where they came from and my roots and my heritage. So even though I wouldn't say it's the most prestigious internship with CBS, but it would have been a stepping stone in that career I initially thought I wanted to do, which was get into the media industry and do work in diversity and inclusion and have, representations of marginalized people in the media. I don't know, my heart just felt like I needed to go to China because before my grandmother passed away, And I was extremely close with her. All she wanted to do was to take me back to China to see where she came from. And I don't think they really were able to go back since they immigrated here to Hawaii. I think they only went back once or twice. So I think I was like, I've never lived in China for a long period of time, and it doesn't pay a lot, but it's enough to get by. And I decided to do it. And it was probably one of the most life-changing experiences for me. And it led me to go to Hong Kong and work there and meet you, and then ended up making me think about my mom's side of the family. So I went to South Korea and taught there, and I'm back at home in graduate school. So kind of full circle.
Yeah. In preparation for this talk, of course, I dig out all the things you were writing on your blog during your time abroad. And there's this, I'm going to quote this back to you now, because I thought it was really intriguing. And it brings us to your mom's side of the story, so to say, of your roots. You wrote in that blog, when I meet new people, I have to say I'm American. My dad is Chinese and my mom is Korean. I can speak a little bit Chinese, but I can't really speak a lot of Korean. So I could not talk to my maternal grandmother. I wanted to be Korean, but my paternal grandmother did not allow me to eat kimchi. I feel I have a lot of pressure. So that's in one of the blogs you wrote, actually in 3 different languages. So I think to me, it's amazing how you actually took on that journey on your own, to learn more about where your parents came from, where your grandparents came from, how they grew up, and learn their language as well. So I thought that was beautiful that you actually put out a blog in all the languages, even the languages you found most challenging, like Korean, that you had just started studying at that time. And I also remember what you said to me in an earlier conversation, where you said, if you landed kind of like in South Korea as a stopover before you came to China, and you could not imagine living there. You were like, I don't fit in. I don't want to go there. I don't want to be there. But then you after your time in China, you made the decision to actually go to South Korea and live there and teach there. So how was that journey for you then, exploring your mom's side of your roots?
I think that initial feeling when I went to Seoul, I just did not, I feel like I did not fit in. I think Seoul has a very, very stylish, everyone is on point. And I also couldn't read or speak any Korean. And that's kind of been a struggle for me growing up my whole life. I picked up Cantonese from my dad's side, but I wasn't able to pick up Korean. So even at family reunions, I was the half-blood, the mixed kid, even though they're, both Asian backgrounds. And it almost really turned me off from my Korean identity, even when I had family members say, oh, look at Carol, she can't even speak Korean. She can't even speak to her grandma. Do you even want to be like Carol, to their own kids? And it was very hurtful. And so for a long time, I almost put that part of me away. And I just said, I would never be Korean. I would never be able to speak Korean. But it was just really interesting how when I was just learning more about, not even just learning, I don't even know how to articulate, just being immersed in China and getting to know wonderful students and coworkers and visiting my grandparents' hometown for the first time and hearing the stories that, they never even told me, but I had to learn from family members there. I just became curious. I think I became curious about, I wonder what kind of stories my mom might have or my harmony might have that I don't know about. And I'm still, of course, learning and growing, but I finally felt comfortable, like, oh, okay, I think I can go to Korea. I think I want to go to Korea. And I finally did. And honestly, it was just so much fun. And I grew really close with my coworkers and my students. And a lot of the fear and anxiety I had, it went away because I felt acceptance that I never thought I could feel. And being able to see where my mom came from too and understand her more. So yeah, it's been a journey. It still is, but I'm really happy to be on it.
In our introduction to the podcast, I also shared that this quest was something that's almost like healing for you as well. When you're looking into your own belonging, but also how you feel about being Asian. And I quote you back now again, because you said something so, I think, empowering for a lot of people that might be listening right now that are on this. And I think it's a constant process, right? We are all trying to come to terms with where we are from and where we belong in today's world. And you said something that really touched me, because you said, my Asian heritage used to give me anxiety. Now it gives me pride. And I get goosebumps just hearing me say that. Even though, I hear it in your voice when I'm reading this. I hear you say it to me when we were talking the other day. Now, when you're back in Hawaii, you made this journey, and actually, this 20 minutes that we have here today doesn't give it credit. We should have like 2 hours to talk about it, or even longer. And I encourage everyone, to just reach out to Carol and connect and get to know this amazing human. Yeah. But now we did it kind of like in a super fast rundown, your last 4 years in 20 minutes. But I guess that's an important part as well. Like you then returning as almost like a different person, right? Returning to your home that maybe you now see with different eyes as well. How is your feeling of belonging different now when you compare it to when you were growing up there?
Yeah, I think belonging, that's such a loaded word. And I think knowing that I simultaneously will never belong, but I deserve to belong at the same time is something that gives me comfort, because, we are our own unique human beings. We have our own stories. And depending on where we go, different places have different cultures and norms. And I think particularly here in Hawaii, it's very diverse, and the Asian community is it's predominantly Asian. But at the same time, when I was growing up, I didn't belong. I felt like I was either too much, too Asian or not Asian, too Chinese, too Korean. Like there's like different ideas and perceptions people have. And when I went through this journey and figured out my own identity, I realized that what I feel like is a sense of home. I think that's something that a lot of us struggle with, especially if our parents or grandparents have moved and migrated, and we feel a lot of difficulty belonging somewhere. Do we belong where they settle? Do we belong when we go back to their homelands? And I think I realized that our homes are carried in our hearts, and it's carried on our backs because of everything not only we've been through, but what our ancestors have been through and have gifted to us. So I think the attitude I'm taking now is sometimes, I still come home and I don't belong in a way that, it just, Carol's home. She just fits in perfectly to everything and it's smooth. But at the same time, me being more confident in myself and being able to pursue something that I wanted to do, which was to learn more about my family, actually kind of helps in a way, since I'm able to have more conversations with my own family. And now I find places in Hawaii where I do belong, and I can have these types of important conversations that I want to continue having. And so I think even though it's a difficult word, I think we have the power to create spaces and to create communities that we can feel a sense of belonging.
Absolutely. And that's so, comforting hearing you say it. I mean, I'm also on my quest of belonging. I've lived in in China now for 10 years. I'm the first person who moved abroad in my family. It's a different, of course, I have a different journey because I have parents that are both from the same country, right? They're both Austrian. We are white, very privileged upbringing. And here in Hong Kong, I think it's very interesting what you shared on a podcast you did together with Ellie. Shout out to Ellie, Across Seas. Yeah, let's give a shout out to this awesome podcast as well, where the two of you were talking about your upbringing as well, and that belonging. And it's interesting for me to listen to it because, of course, I never had to go through these struggles, but we all have our own challenges, how we are, coping and trying to fit in. And me as a foreigner in Asia, I think my podcast also is a quest for me. Yeah. #Impact is a quest for me to connect also with the local community so that I get to understand them better. And I often feel that the podcast helps so much with them opening up and sharing stories with me as well, even before we press record, most importantly, before we press record. And that's really such a gift, I guess. We all us podcasters that are listening now, or people considering starting a podcast, a gift we can really give to us having these conversations. Carol, I think all of the podcasters listening right now, if you need an amazing guest to talk about so many things, not just Asian heritage, reach out to Carol. But I know we have to wrap up for the Q&A, but I want to give our listeners also like a little bit of a teaser of what's coming up on #Impact Season 5, coming from Honolulu, and how your studies you're doing right now can inspire you for our theme, the Sustainable Development Goals that we're addressing in this season. What can they expect?
It's really interesting for me to be home. And I think when a lot of people think about Hawaii, they think about palm trees, they think about beaches, and it is beautiful. Don't get me wrong. But there are a lot of people here really trying to make a difference. And even though we are an island, one of the most isolated islands in the world, I think our role in global politics, I think our role in creating new futures, and the people doing the work here is really something to tap into and learn from. So I hope I can give a different picture of Hawaii that a lot of people don't get to hear, but also with a purpose of creating a better future for the next generation.
All of our guests have to go to the quick fire round. You know it, Carol, and we're doing it now to wrap up this episode. Making an impact means?
Making an impact means, wow, we make our guests do this, but this is really hard. I think it just simply means to continue learning and growing. Like you're learning and growing yourself and learning and growing about other people and connecting.
Who inspires you in the way they are tackling the Sustainable Development Goals?
You know what, Regina? I'm going to say you. I think you making a whole season about the SDGs and really bringing in all these people from around the world. I think it's great.
Yeah. Okay. Don't get me all emotional, Carol, please. But rather tell our listeners, what could everyone do right now to make the world a better place?
I think something I've been thinking a lot about, and with everything I've said, give yourself a big hug. I think, we are all doing amazing, incredible work, especially if we're here in this space right now. And shout out to Lee and Andy for creating this space for us, especially with everything Asians have gone through, not only historically, but this past year with COVID. So give yourself a big hug, give yourself some rest, and then keep doing the amazing work that you're doing.
Yeah, thank you so much. And with this, it's a wrap. Over to Lee. Thank you, Carol, for doing this with me.
Regina.
Thank you. Everybody, let's give them a round of applause. That was
we did it.
Great.
Yay.
Carol, when you share of yourself like that, it just inspires other people. And what I mean by that, it's so cheesy to say, oh, yes, we're inspiring people. But what that really means is when people hear what you have to say. And as they're listening, I know while I was listening, I was like, oh yeah, I completely identify with the whole visit to when you were talking about your Korean relatives and the hardships there. I'm in that boat with you. And it what it is it's nice to know that we're not really alone. Right. And that we can, so now I know that I could probably reach out to you and be like, yeah, I want to talk more about that, or just connect. And so those little gems that you drop, I think are inspiring, because when we know that we're not alone, that's my dog. When we know that we're not alone, hello, work from home, when we're not alone, that gives us, I think, confidence to do more. Right. So often when we're alone, we second guess ourselves. But then when we know that somewhere someone has been through the same thing, it's not so rough. Right. And so thank you so much. And I do want to encourage folks to put their comments in the chat. And I hope everyone is clicking save chat occasionally to hang on to it. And then Ty said, when you were talking about those things, Carol, he had said in the chat that it's beautiful what you were saying. So I think that and Jen says that it was beautifully said, Carol, when you said that we carry our homes on our backs and in our hearts. And absolutely. So if anyone would like to unmute themselves and ask Regina or give comments to Carol, please do so. I'm going to ask a couple more questions, but I would love to open up the floor for conversation. And so, Ty, maybe you can share what led you to say that's beautiful. Like, what moved you? What part of what Carol was sharing resonated with you, for example? And Ty, take it away.
Yeah, totally. So I'm bicultural, and so I definitely resonated with what you said about the feeling of like placelessness and culturelessness. And it can go both ways. You can feel at times like you have no culture, and at times like you have an abundance and a wealth of culture. And I think a lot of that comes down to going through those experiences like you described, of reflecting on your heritage and what it means to you and the lessons that you've learned and the connections with your family and so on. So one thing I was just wondering is, like, what did you find, or did you find like lessons in your journey about the way that you think, or the way that you were taught to think or raised to think, relative to the way that you're that people in Korea think, or people in China think? That was there an epiphany that you had? Because I've had a lot of like things I noticed about the way that I think differently than people who live in Japan, even though we come from the same lineage.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was a lot of little epiphanies, but something that really impacted me was, I think, parenting. So when I was growing up, my dad was like really, really strict, and when I went to China, it was like a mix. You have like really like I thought, oh, okay, so like, Chinese parents are like this, but then when you go to China, you have a mix where it's almost normalized in some instances, but then you also have like super chill and relaxed Chinese parents too. So I think myself growing up, that it's instead of generalizing, like something that I would always do, I generalize. I'd learn how to ask why, like, where does this come from? I think particularly when going to these countries and learning about their geopolitical histories, which is why I'm back in graduate school studying Asian international affairs. Sometimes I'd ask like, I wonder why my mom, just like walks ahead of us and leaves us behind and then we have to catch up to her. But then going back to her hometown and knowing like, okay, like her mom came from North Korea, had to start a business at a fishing village, and all of her family's fast paced, and okay, I guess this is why my mom has this particular habit. So just like little instances where I started noticing things and trying to piece them together with, where does my family fit in? What particular point in history did they leave? And how did I grow up? That's kind of a big part of my time abroad, if that makes sense.
So,
yeah, very cool. Thank you.
wait, why was your mom walking fast?
She kind of picked that up from her mom. So when my harmony came from North Korea, they had to escape during the Korean War, and then she had to create her own fish market kind of business. And so I think the whole family, because it wasn't just my grandmother did pass away, but I noticed all my mom's sisters did the same thing my mom did. They all walk fast like that. And even though they're in this like little fishing village town. So I think me kind of putting together the pieces like, oh, okay, I guess this is what my grandmother had to do to survive and make a business. And, you know, after they left everything behind in North Korea. And I think it's also reflective of a lot of like Asian communities too. What do our families and ancestors have to do given the circumstances? I remember Jen was talking on her podcast about like what the Philippines went through with all the different colonialisms that they had to go through. Like what is that result? Because our families are always going to be affected by that. So yeah, I think it was just really interesting, kind of figuring out these little quirks about both my parents and where that stems from.
Did you find that once you pieced that together, as Angela says in the chat, did you find that maybe it was one less thing that you had to take personally?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think I think a lot of the times, and I'm not sure if anyone else feels this way, it's like, oh, I did something wrong. This is my fault. But then I think throughout my journey, I realized, oh, wait, you know, my parents are human too. You know, they have personalities, they have baggage, they have quirks. And they were just trying to figure out, how do you raise a kid in a country they never grew up in? And I think something I had to even think about like a couple weeks ago, I thought, oh, wait, my mom's native tongue is Korean and my dad's is Chinese. So they had to talk to each other in their second language. And so, oh, maybe that's why they had a lot of miscommunication and some arguments, you know, growing up. Oh, okay. I never thought of it that way. So kind of seeing that context and situations really affect a person, but also they're human beings. They have quirks and everything else. Yeah, I think it helped me really think, okay, it's not something wrong with me. It's not something wrong with them. It's just like the situation at hand. So how do I, instead of wanting to change them or change myself, like, okay, try to understand the situation more. If that makes sense. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so does anyone else want to chime in, unmute themselves and add to the conversation, make a comment, have a question? And so Regina, so you're fluent in which languages?
Well, fluent, you know, English and German. German is my native tongue. At some point I was quite good at Mandarin because it was, you know, I was living there and it was my major at university, but unfortunately I'm like really not using it much here anymore. It's so sad. And I also speak Swedish because my husband is Swedish. What you just said, Carol, like it really hit me. Like when you said, we also communicating we communicate in English, right? Me and my husband and it recently hit me that my children are third culture kids because they grow up here in Hong Kong. That's their home. When you ask them, you know, my roots are in Austria, my husband's are in Sweden. And then when you ask them, where are you from? They say Hong Kong. What is so interesting. It just hit me. I hadn't realized that I'm actually raising third culture kids. Yeah, so it's a funny mix in our house. Yeah, it's oftentimes chaos and frustrations. Yeah, with even when you think like Sweden and Austria, we're both from Europe, but there are still cultural differences. It just is. But yeah, we're trying to see it all with a bit of humor as well when it comes to this misunderstandings.
Absolutely. And Carol, so which language, Carol, there you are. Oh, so in my Zoom, did your boxes shift for some reason? Yeah, I was like, wait, where's Carol?
Oh, yeah. I think because we have folks raising their hands, so
Yeah.
it kind of
Oh,
puts
is
them.
that what that is? This is live, people. Lee, get it together. Okay, so Carol, what languages do you speak now?
Again, fluency is something I'm still working on, but English, and then Cantonese, Mandarin, and I'm currently trying to learn Korean.
Wow. That's wow. And who here speaks another language? Who here speaks another language? Mila, what languages do you speak? And Gillen, what do you speak?
So I speak Indonesian and English, obviously. I grew up in Germany, so I speak German. And then and I speak French.
What? That's amazing. Gillen, what do you speak?
Compared to Mila, well, I was born in Brazil. What little, I guess, Portuguese I lost when I was 5.5. I grew up, my mom is from Shanghai. I know a couple of words of Shanghaiese, and my father's from Taishan. So I speak Cantonese and a little Taishanese. But more of the people on that end have passed away. And I want to mention, Carol, that I highly recommend, if you can record your parents whenever you get a chance, do so. I wish that my parents were around, because I have so many questions for them about our history, just so many questions that when I was younger, I was a little embarrassed, right? I went to school. I was the only Asian kid. In fact, it was basically an all-white neighborhood. And I kind of dismissed that side of the family. So, because I wanted to fit in with all my friends. In fact, I didn't speak English in first grade. I spoke to other kids in Chinese. I didn't know, I'm like, I don't know what you're saying, but, So I think it's so good to know all that, like building the family tree and knowing where people are from and that kind of thing. Because when we buy that package of Ancestry 23 or whatever, there isn't much there, right? There isn't much data for Asians. So it's hard to get that information. If I were to go back to Shanghai, I think there's some relatives there or relatives of relatives. And, you don't know who adopts who. And so I don't even know if we're blood related, but that would be a way to find out more of the family history. So anyway, that's my answer.
That's a great answer. And, here's the thing. So Angela says she speaks Mandarin. Marilyn says that she's fluent in sarcasm. Okay. So I remember being asked in 6th grade on that survey that you're supposed to fill out for the school, what languages you speak at home. And I was like, Pig Latin. And I had to go buy my language. I had to learn the hard way. My father never spoke to me in Japanese, so I had to do it the hard way. Ugh. And so I implore anybody who's going to have kids and you have these languages under your belt, just, speak to your kids in those languages so they don't have to struggle like I did. But so this has been great. We are almost at our next show. So I want to find out if anyone has any other comments. And Carol and Regina, after having recorded your episode and sharing all that you did, do you have thoughts and comments that maybe you wanted to add or share with us, or any kind of nuggets or takeaways that you think that we should know going forward? Anything?
Yeah, maybe I kick off and then I hand over to Carol. I think it's so powerful just to share these stories. So thank you for giving this platform. That's all I want to say. If anyone is listening right now, feeling touched and it resonated, then, just where's my little box? Speak up. Your voice matters. Your story matters. You don't have to make yourself smaller. And I think it's only human to question that. And it's important that we push through that uncomfortable thing of, is it important what I have to say? Because it really is important. Yeah. That's my nugget. Also listening to all of you and what you put out there in the world. I think we just have to keep showing up for ourselves, but also for our audience. Yeah. Carol, what do you think?
Yeah, I cannot agree more. And the only other couple of things I would say is definitely subscribe to Hashtag Impact. I think it's just a really big network and community. And Regina also has a podcasting mentorship course if you're interested in learning or starting a podcast or know anyone who wants to. But other than that, I also say that I'm still trying to figure out, I think you all are so incredible. Like you said, you wanted to start your own podcast and you did it. You did the branding and everything. And I'm still trying to figure out, okay, how do I want to carve my space in a very, in this way. So I hope that we can connect. I know there were a few people that were raising their hands and we weren't able to get to. So I'll put my contact information in the chat, and I hope we can continue this conversation beyond the festival. And I thank again, Lee and Andy, for all the work that you're doing, because this life is tough. Creating a podcast is tough. Everything's tough. So it's really great that we can at least, be there for one another and support one another in this way, even though, we aren't physically next to each other.
Yes, please do connect with us. I will put all the socials of Carol as well as Lee and Andy from the Asian American Podcasters Association in the show notes. I will also put a link to the other podcasters that were part of the first Asian podcast festival there as well, so you can go check them out. Please hit follow or subscribe on your podcast player as you're listening to Hashtag Impact. And if you want some behind the scenes and some more insights into what we are doing at our community, you can sign up for our free newsletter over at hashtagimpact.com/subscribe. Again, thank you so much to Lee and Andy for creating a safe space for sharing and connecting. Make sure to check out what they're doing as well. You can find all their links over at www.aapodcasters.org. We are super thrilled to be part of their community, and I'm sure you will enjoy finding out more about them too. Talk to you soon. Bye.